Evening, everybody. We'll be getting started very, very shortly. I'm just finishing setting stuff up, and then we'll be good to go. Alrighty, folks, we are going to make a start. How are we doing, folks? I hope you're all doing well. Good evening once again. Back so soon, actually. Yeah, I have a bit of a low frequency hum issue, the source of which I am not sure about. I think it's entirely possible that I have a dodgy cable in my system somewhere. I think maybe the grounding on this mic has come away somewhere, which means we're getting a nice low hum, which is not great. So I think it is about time that this guy got replaced. So this is the Behringer C1 mic, actually, which only cost me about £40, which is no money at all, really. So I'm in the market for something else. I am currently looking at a microphone made by a British company called Aston Microphones. You may have heard of them. They are starting to make a big kind of impression for themselves, having won some awards for their microphones. So I'm looking at getting their Origin mic. And the cool thing about that is I wouldn't need this thing anymore, because it's got a built-in pop filter and a built-in shock mount, so I won't even need one of those cradles either, necessarily. I might get one anyway. But yeah, and I'm going to get some new cabling, so hopefully we should have some better quality audio going on in this studio, particularly for my videos, because I have to use a noise gate relatively extensively on my videos to get rid of some of the low hum. So I hope you guys are not, if you have subs in your studios, I hope that it is not currently going as I'm talking to you. So there it is. So we have 7 people here, and I'm going to go and have a look and see who's in, because I've not had a look whilst I've been trying to sort out that issue. So we have Woodbeast, as ever, is here. Good to see you, mate. And Miles McGonigal and Rainer, my good friend over in Germany. And Peter is here. Peter, I've done some mixed critiques for him. I hope things are going well for you, Peter. Miles says, only a black tie if the lights are out. Don Hamer is here. And good old Skip, my very, very good friend, Skip Jones, is here. He's fantastic. He puts out links to all of my live streams, just about everywhere he can think of, which is great because that's the one thing that I usually forget, which of course is not going to help get people into this. So who else do we have here? I think that's pretty much it at the moment. Woodby says, sounds good here in Baltimore. Baltimore, you know, I would love to go to Baltimore. I hear lots of good things about Baltimore. I hear it getting name checked in a lot of songs, quite a lot actually. So that's quite interesting. Wichita, Kansas. There's a song written about Wichita as well, isn't there? Woodby says Skip is like a legend. What do you mean like a legend? He is a legend. He will never admit that himself, but he is in fact a legend. So we have 8 people in here. It'd be nice if we could get a few more people in here before we start taking people's questions. But that said, if you have a question that you are just itching to ask and is a burning question that you would like dealt with, then get it going. Yeah, Wichita Lineman, that's the one. Yep. I still have no idea what that song's about, other than I think it's about Wichita in Wichita in some way. Wichita, that sounds like a Native American name. Is it in the Sioux? Isn't the Sioux area? I'm not really sure. My American geography is not necessarily great. Do I have a theme for tonight's Q&A? Actually, I don't. I was meant to, but then kind of like today has just been ridiculously busy and I haven't actually stopped to think about it. I know that last time we did compressors and compression. So actually, if you guys still have questions from that show that we never covered, then you can ask those as well. So we can talk about compression. We can talk about EQ. We can talk about all sorts of stuff. But yeah, if we could kind of focus around how we use EQ and compression, because those are really the 2 main tools of mixing. I would suggest that really to build a solid, professional sounding mix, you need to have a good grasp of EQ and a good grasp of compression. Certainly, to get going, you need to have the basics of how they both work and how to apply them a little bit. And you'll find actually the more you EQ tracks, the more you're mixing, you know, the better you're going to get at EQing, the sharper your ears are going to get to discerning problem areas, frequencies that need removed, and also frequencies that need enhanced in order to make a particular element of your mix stand out. A lot of people think a little bit flat in terms of when you're starting out. They think a little flat in terms of their mix, a little bit two-dimensional, kind of like they have this panned over here, this panned over here, and then the vocal up the middle. And they don't really think about, well, what are the main features of the mix other than the vocal? The lead vocal is going to be, of any popular song, the most important thing in your mix. So you want that to be clear, down to the syllabic level. Every subtle nuance you can get out of a vocal, you need to try and get that. And there are ways to achieve that using EQ and compression, where you would perhaps spend a bit more time, a bit more care, and a bit more attention, even in the choice of EQ and compressors for your lead vocal, that you wouldn't for any other element of your mix. And this is where you kind of you begin to grow in your skills as a mix engineer. And taking your mixes to the next level is how you treat the star elements of your mix. So that would include the lead vocal, but it would also include any other instruments or voices that have a contributing role to supporting that lead vocal. So that could be a saxophone obligato, that could be horn section, that could be a lead guitar that kind of nurdles away throughout the whole song, providing kind of like a counter melody to the vocal sung melody. So those are the elements of your mix that you need to have kind of like set apart in a little kind of way, set apart, make them stand out in your mix. So I think that should be the focus for this evening, that we talk about how we achieve that, how we achieve getting those elements to shine more than the other elements of your mix. And there are kind of secrets, I suppose, to it, of how you would actually do it. So Whitby says, is compression like a volume control? Yes, fundamentally, that's exactly what it is. You may well have heard people like Graham talking about it being like having an automated volume controller. A little bit, I suppose, like automation, except it's not quite automation. It's a little bit different. But yeah, essentially a compressor is an automatic volume controller, because you give it the instructions as to when to turn the volume down, by how much to turn the volume down, how quickly to turn it down, and how quickly to return it back to normal level. So that's kind of what a compressor does in a nutshell, but that's kind of like one dimension to compression. Yes, compression is a volume controller, but it's also a tone shaper. You can use compression to shape the tone of an instrument, and that would be how you deal with attack and release on the compressor. So, for example, if you want an element of your mix to sit further back in the mix, then you would use a faster attack setting than you would something that you want to be forward and kind of reaching out of the speakers. And then how you deal with the release is going to also affect and shape the tone of that particular track, whatever it might be, because there are things you can do using the release setting on the compressor that will help you shape the body and the tail of a particular audio event. So even something as kind of abrupt and short as a snare drum hit, you can shape the body and the tail of that by using the release of the compressor. So yes, you want the compressor fundamentally to release before the next snare drum hit, so that you are not kind of getting what I call double compression, which is where the compressor begins to engage whilst it's still engaged, whilst it's still releasing. And that ends up compounding upon itself, and then you end up kind of with kind of like what I would call a cyclone of compression, which you really don't want. Is that also like a limiter? Just Bob says, hey, Just Bob, good to see you. A limiter is a type of compressor, yes. But a limiter, what a limiter does is a limiter, instead of being used to shape the tone of an instrument or a voice, a limiter basically would stop the audio going past a certain point, whereas a compressor doesn't do that. If you were to have a compressor at, say, a 2-to-1 ratio, then what's happening is the audio, if I reach under my mic here, the audio is going to go and kind of, if this is the threshold, my finger here is the threshold, the audio in volume is going to come up and it's going to cross that threshold. The compressor is going to, according to your settings, turn it down. And when it does, it turns it down by the amount that you set on the ratio. But that means that it's going to turn it down by half. So for every 2 dB over threshold, the compressor will turn it down to 1. So that's essentially how it works. If you're good at maths, you can work out the ratio and how much compression you're going to get mathematically. That's not the approach I take, because I have a big problem with numbers. I always have had a big problem with numbers. So for me, it's about what I hear. I do it by listening and by feeling the effect of the compressor. So I don't necessarily pay that much attention to the numbers that I get. I kind of know I want a faster attack because I want less transient, or I want a slower release because I want more body and more tail. When you turn everything back up, that's kind of what I want. So a limiter doesn't really have that kind of turning down but leaving a little bit over threshold like a compressor does. It basically stops it. It stops it dead, which is why we call it a limiter. It has a limit. Some people refer to a limiter as a brick wall. Basically, the audio slams into the brick wall and cannot go any further. So it would have like something over a 20 or 30 to 1 ratio to it if you were to give a limiter a ratio. So I hope that answered your question, Just Bob. We have 11 people here. That's good, man. That's good. So yeah, compression is really, really important in being able to shape the tone of a track and also position a track in terms of front to back of your mix. So that's one of the real skills with compression, is that you're not just using compression to control the dynamic range, but the next step is now you are skillful at controlling the dynamic range of a track and getting it to sit in your mix nicely, which is what you want. The next step is to take that skill with compression and start being artistic with it. So instead of just being scientific and getting it to sit at this particular dynamic range so that it slots into your mix like a jigsaw in a jigsaw puzzle, the next thing to do is then you start using the attack and the release of the compressor to start to shape the tone. Now, there are other compressors other than the stock compressor. Stock compressor is great because what that allows you to do is it allows you to learn the kind of the basic skills of compression. It allows you to learn how to control your dynamic range, how to do that transparently without getting that pumping effect, unless the particular style of music that you're working in, that pumping effect is necessary, is a requirement stylistically, in which case you're wanting that pumping effect. For the rest of us, you're not wanting to do that. You're wanting to control the dynamic range transparently, and the stock compressor in Studio One, and actually the stock compressor in Pro Tools, are really, really good at that. And you know they are completely transparent. You don't even know they're there, which is great. But if you want to do something nice and bring some character and some warmth, or something just distinctive to a particular track, then using something like an 1176 or an LA2A or a Neve or a Fairchild, those kind of compressors, they add something something unique to each one of those devices. That again, it then steps outside of the realm of the math and the science of it, and into how can I creatively use what that compressor brings to my audio to add something cool to make this element stand out. For example, let's say you are going to use stock plugins for the majority of your mix. How are you going to make your lead vocals stand out? and set and kind of stand apart a little bit in terms of character and color from the rest of your mix. Well, that's where using something like an 1176 or an LA2A will make a difference, because those compressors, they don't just compress, they sound different. And so you can do something really distinctive there. And then again, let's say you do that with your lead guitar. So now you have your lead vocal and your lead guitar that are using different compressors than the rest of your mix, and maybe even a different EQ. Instead of using the stock EQ, maybe using a Neve, or maybe using the SSL channel, the E channel. Or if you're mixing something that's a little bit heavier, then maybe you might want to use the SSL-G channel. That would be a good option, because the SSL-G channel is just a little bit more aggressive than the E. So there you go. So there's some compression ideas and some EQ options for you to think about in terms of how you might get the distinctive leading. A lot of mix engineers speak in terms of their star elements of the mix. So your kind of leading lady is going to be your lead vocal, even if it's a male vocal. You can still refer to it in terms of the leading lady of this mix is going to be your lead vocal, and then other complementary elements like a saxophone solo or a lead guitar or something else that's providing a counter melody that supports the vocal. Those are going to be star elements of your mix. You can treat them very differently. I think we may have just frozen on the stream just a little bit. I think my bandwidth is pretty low today, so I do apologize. I hope at the very least you can still hear me coming through clearly, even if the picture quality is ropey. So sorry about that, folks. But yeah, so that's what I would suggest that you maybe go and experiment with on your next mixes. Martin Weeks is here, and he says, can you go into a little detail about the advanced features of the MJUC, the Klanghelm compressor? Well, the cool thing about the Klanghelm is that it is 3 compressors for the price of 1. You get something that's, the Mark 1 is kind of like a late 1950s compressor. The Mark 2 is maybe a little bit more kind of mid 60s, and then the Mark 3 is a little bit more contemporary, a little bit more modern sounding. And I think I've done a product review actually of the Klanghelm MJUC that's about 45 minutes long. And I basically go into all of the elements of that compressor there, including some of the parts of the compressor that are in the little drop-down hidden compartment at the bottom of the compressor. The MJUC is a fantastic compressor. If you don't have it, I would thoroughly recommend going and getting it. It's very cheap. It's only 25 euros, I think, which is going to be about 30 or so dollars. I got it for 20 pounds because I got it when the euro had crashed a little bit against the pound. So I thought, oh, I'm going to pick that up because it's cheap with the pound just now. So that's what I did. And it's fantastic. So go get it. Go try it out. That's what I'd say, because it's a no-brainer. You cannot lose with it. Let's go see what else we've got up here. Martin says, there's a well-known plugin called Limiter 6. It's a huge beast with compressors, limiters, anti-peak, and so on. I'm not familiar with that, Martin. And you said you gave up on using it as too much for you. Well, you know what? Yeah. I would suggest don't use complex tools if you're not maybe at that point yet to use them. My DIY skills are pretty limited. In fact, I'm pretty awful at DIY. I have one hammer in my toolbox. I have one screwdriver. I have a monkey wrench. And in fact, I have one screwdriver that has lots of different screw heads for it. So it has a cross, It has the straight. It has a couple of other ones. It has a tiny little Phillips head, and it's great. I just, all I need to do is just look at the screw and work out which screw head needs to go on the screwdriver, and that's it. It's like my multi-tool, my multi-screw driving tool. But my toolbox is very, very limited because my skills are very, very limited. There are some people that have got all sorts of electronic stuff. Like a friend of mine has one of those screwdrivers that's electronic. It's got a magnet on the end of it, so it never loses contact with the screw. And you just put it on, you press the button, and it screws it in for you. Job done. He knows how to use that. I don't. I've tried using it, and I end up splitting wood all the time or bending the screws. So use what you're good with, and then as you get really, really, really good with it and you've got the fundamentals totally down, then maybe you can start experimenting with something else that's a little bit more complex or does something different. So yeah, that's what I would say there. Woodby says, can you use the original track, duplicate it, and then compress it to make that cool 3D sound? I think you're talking a little bit about parallel compression. Parallel compression is fantastic. It's incredibly useful because what you can do with parallel compression is you can take, say, your kick drum. You can let's say you take your kick drum and your snare drum, two most important elements of your drum track, and you send them, you create a bus, you put your compressor of choice for parallel compression, mine is the 1176, park that on there, and then do a pre-fade ascend of the snare and the kick to that bus, and then you go to the 1176 in my case, and you hit the all button, which gives you kind of like basically it's more than 20-to-1 on the ratio, I guess, is what it would be. And then you adjust to taste. And what you want to do is you want to smack it to smithereens. You want to smack your kick drum and snare drum to smithereens. And then you just blend that back in alongside your regular drum bus that's got normal, sensible compression on it. And you blend the two together. And I tell you what ends up happening, if you get it right, you end up with the kick and snare drum kind of like right forward in the mix, which is fantastic for dance music, or for something that's disco, that's four to the floor. Kick drum, very important. Snare drum, very important for the backbeat. And you can parallel compress those and bring those forward. And it just sounds epic. I think maybe that's what you're referring to. I'm not entirely 100% sure. Peter says, if you're a Studio One professional user, you have the splitter option, so you don't have to duplicate your track to parallel compress. That is correct. You can do it that way for sure. I like the splitter. I really do. It makes things tidier. I think that's the biggest benefit to the splitter, is that you can do multiple parallel processings. You can parallel EQ. You can parallel compress. You can do all sorts of things. You can stick a reverb on there and compress the reverb. You can do all sorts of fantastic stuff using the splitter. It's really, really cool. It's not something I use very, very much because most of the work that I do in this studio is acoustic music and jazz. There's not really much of a call for parallel compression or parallel EQ or anything like that here. So, but that's not to say I don't use it when I need to. You know, at the moment I'm working with a client who has, I did an acoustic record with him maybe a year or so ago. And he's decided he wants to do a disco remix of his record, and he wants to add some bonus songs to that record as well. So I'm going back to my 70s roots and going deep into disco, and giving it a slightly jazzy flavor, but it's mostly disco, four to the floor stuff, maybe with elements of house as well. So it's a little bit of a kind of disco dance house fusion thing going on there. So yeah, so I'm using parallel compression extensively there. And yes, you can use the splitter to do that. Raina says, I use a Puig Child even without compressing, only for the color. Yes, that's the other thing about using an analog style plugin, is that you can just run the audio through. You don't actually adjust anything. You just run the audio through it, and you get the benefit of the color that that plugin emulation brings. So it's emulating the electronics, the transformers, the tubes, whatever it might be, on the particular case of a compressor that you're using, and it will just add that color to your sound, and it will sound awesome even if you don't do a thing to it. Do-do-do-do. Produce something, Jay. That's what we're here for, says Ice Mike. Well, actually, I thought we were here for kind of questions as well, not just about me playing stuff. But yes, I do like playing stuff for you guys. But as I say, you know, my bandwidth is limited, so I have to be careful about what I do and how I do it, because I don't want it to sound rubbish. Let's see, what else do we have? I like interrupting myself with little weird melodies. Just Bob says, if you use different compressors or amounts of compression on different instruments, you can muddy up sound and make it sound unnatural. You can if you're not careful. The thing to remember with compression is how much you're compressing, not just on the particular track, but how you're compressing further down the line. So you may well have a compression on your individual track. You may well have compression on the bus. You then may well have mixed bus compression going on. So you need to think not just in terms of I'm putting a compressor on this bass track because I'm compressing the bass track. Think ahead. Think several moves down the line. I'm compressing 2 dB here because I'm also compressing 2 dB on the bass, and the mix bus is going to add a little bit of compression as well. So add that all up. How much compression is that going to be? Is that going to be too much for that bass? Is it not going to be enough? So think about the cumulative effect that compression has down the line through your mix. So yes, it can muddy up the sound if you're over compressing. And it can certainly muddy up the sound if you are also not EQing correctly to deal with some of the low end. Okay, so high pass filtering, also pulling out, you know, that kind of 300 to 500 area, which is inherently an issue, particularly in home studio recordings. So, you know, getting some of that low energy out of your mix without making your mix thin. If you are high pass filtering, don't just do it because you've heard somebody said high pass filter. Do it intentionally. Everything that you do in your mix should be intentional. You know, if I were to visit your studio and sit with you as you mixed, I should be able to ask you a question, why are you doing that? And you should be able to justify that move. So ask yourself those questions before you even start. You know, I'm going to high pass filter this piano. Why am I high pass filtering the piano? What's that going to do? What's that going to do not just to the sound of the piano, but what's that going to do in terms of the overall mix? Is it going to make the mix too thin? You need to think about those kind of things. MJUC, isn't it like an LA2A? No, it's not, because well, it's not modeled on an LA2A. It kind of looks like it is because it has an input and an output knob, and that's essentially how the Mark I of the compressor certainly works. But it's not really an LA2A. I'm not really sure what Tony, the guy, yeah, he is actually a fellow countryman of yours, Rainer. He's a German guy. I'm not really sure what he's modeled these compressors after. I kind of get the impression that he's kind of designed them himself, so they are his own kind of creative brain children, if you like. But yeah, it has a beautiful sound all of its own, and you can't really compare it to an LA2A. And I have tried, by the way. I've run the same tracks through the LA2A and through the MJUC, and they are quite considerably different in tonality and color. Martin says Johnny's video is very good, and so is the review of it on Mixbus TV. Yes, the guys at Mixbus TV are fantastic. They're a great bunch of guys, and their product reviews are outstanding. They are definitely worth sitting up and listening to. Martin then says, since a lot of plugins, both stock and otherwise, have mix knobs, I've been told by you and others that it is a parallel blend thing. Yes, you can use the mix knob to help you attain a parallel blend, because essentially the mix knob, if you put it, dead straight up the middle, then you're going to get equal amounts of processed and unprocessed signal. So yeah, you can play about with that. So why would someone use, Martin says, why would somebody use the splitter tool if the stock plugin does this already? The splitter tool does something completely different, Martin. It doesn't just do a blend, okay? It's not just a blend of processed or unprocessed. Kind of does that, but it doesn't just do that. You can create your own little effects chain within your effects chain. So you can have your reverb, you can compress your reverb, you can parallel compress your reverb, you can then run all of that through an EQ, all on the one splitter. Okay, so you're actually splitting the signal. You can either split the signal by frequency. You know what? I can pretty much see I'm going to have to do a video on the split tool. So I will do a video on the splitter tool. Okay, and I will post that up maybe early next week. Because actually I kind of realize I don't actually have a video on the splitter tool, so maybe I should do one and show you how it works. All right, but yeah, the splitter tool is not the same thing as the mix knob on the EQ or the compressor. Martin says, ARG, not disco. Well, sometimes you have to do what pays the bills, Martin. Platform shoes plug-in. Woodbeast, you are hilarious, mate. You really are. Martin says, I can't see Jonny Lipsham doing the John Travolta dancing thing. You are quite correct, Martin. I have zero talent for dancing. My mother is an ex-professional ballet and contemporary jazz dancer, as well as a comedian and soul singer. She has more talent in her little finger than I have in my entire body. I can tell you that much. Ice Mike says, okay, no problem. Oh, yes. Yeah. Thank you, Ice Mike. That would be a Kodak moment for sure. Yes, it would be a Kodak moment that is probably never going to be. Martin says, MGUC is rapidly becoming a go-to compressor side by side with the LA2A and 1176. A lot of people are raving about it, that's for sure. Peter says, I've noticed when you're sharing your screen that you have the fat channel on almost every channel. Is that your go-to channel strip, or is it the SSL? I use the SSL extensively in my mixes since I've had it. I have to back up a little bit and give you a little bit of my history, Peter, because when I first started mixing, I started out actually in a studio called Sentinel Studios. And in that studio, they had an SSL console from which the E channel is derived that you get from Waves. And Universal Audio and a whole bunch of other people have their own versions of the same thing. And that's where I started to learn how to mix. I sat with an engineer. In fact, I sat with several engineers who were very, very patient with me as a young kid. When I was about, 14, 15, 16, basically taking me through how the compressor works on the SSL, how the EQ works, how the bus compressor works at the end of the console chain and everything else. So that's where I started. And I had a great time. I was in that studio for 2 years. And, eventually kind of rose up through how studios worked back then to assistant engineering on a whole bunch of things. Orchestral stuff, brass band stuff, rock band, folk bands, skiffle bands, you name it, I mixed it back then. And you know what? It was really cool. But I learned on an SSL console. So when Waves had the SSL E channel up for grabs for $29, I was just like, right, I've got to go back. I've been using stock plugins since 2003. It's about time I stopped. So that's what I did. And the SSLE channel was the one of the first third-party compressors that I got. Well, third-party plugins, I should say, that I got. The very first one was the Klanghelm MJUC. Just Bob says, thank you for answering. Makes more sense to me looking further down the process instead of immediately. Yeah, exactly. Mixing is well, it's like what you do when you're mixing the elements to make a cake. You know, you have to have them all in the right balance, and you have to think several steps ahead about the end product. You have to have the end product in mind. What's it going to be when it's been in the oven? What's it, where does it need to be before it goes in the oven? If you were to regard the oven as the mastering part of the process, and kind of like the mixing and all the prep stuff, that's your mixing process. Bringing all of the elements together, the flour and the chocolate and all of the other stuff that you need to put in. I'm hopeless at cooking. Don't ask me about cooking. So this is a tenuous analogy for me because I don't know enough. My wife does. My wife is awesome at making cakes. She's got it down to a fine art. I still have to follow recipes. I have to look at something and go, right, 4 ounces of that, right, measure that out. Okay, that's 4 ounces. That's great. Okay, now I can put that in. And how many eggs is that? 1, 2. Okay, 2. So I'm still a little bit like that. But that's because I just need to practice. The more I practice, the more I'm going to be not looking at the recipes. I'm going to know what I need to do. I need to have 4 ounces of that. I need to have that much milk. I need to have that much flour. I'll just know. It'll be instinctive. And that's where you get to when you're mixing. Martin says bussing would be the egg beater and how fast or slowly you turn the egg beater to blend stuff in. Maybe. I don't want to push the analogy too far because there might be people here among the 10 of us who don't know anything about cooking. So we've been going for just about 45 minutes or so. I hope that so far this has been helpful for you. We've talked a lot about thinking about the star elements of your mixes and how you get those to stand out in your mix. Always remembering that every element in a popular song is subservient entirely to the lead vocal. So you treat your lead vocal with some extra love, which is why I mix the lead vocal last. I always mix the lead vocal last. Now, whilst I'm talking, I'm going to show you, if I can find it. If I've still got it, I might have actually deleted it by mistake because I've been deleting a whole bunch of pictures at the moment. So I'm going to see if I can find you my backwards mixing map, which is not my own idea. Where is it? I might not even have it. I'll be crossing myself if I don't. Where is it? Wibby says, you helped me with your compression explanation. Well, that's great to hear, Wibbeast. And all you need to do now is just go put that into practice now, and and see. It's going to take some practice for you to get it down, but you will get there. You absolutely will get there, and you will find yourself fairly quickly compressing like a champ. Okay, it's not on my hard drive, so I'm hoping that it is still on my Facebook page, my studio Facebook page. Because this would come in real handy, this picture, if I can find it. Where is it? Oh dear, I think I might have accidentally got rid of it. It's from everywhere. Let's see. Sorry, you guys can't actually see what I'm doing at all. Backwards mixing. See if I can find it. Oops. Because I know I've put this up on Facebook. It's just a question of trying to find the thing. And this might actually be the hardest way of doing it by search in the Facebook search string. Forever. Okay. I don't know what I've done with it. That's really annoying because I was going to show you this image. And I thought I still had it. Man, I'm absolutely desperate to show you guys this because it's really, really going to help you when you're thinking in terms of mixing down the line and compression down the line. And I cannot find it. It's really annoying. And I'm probably losing people rapidly. All right, I might have to see if I can just do a Google search for it. Backwards mixing map. Let's see if we can find it. Images. Okay. I'm not immediately seeing it, which is so infuriating. Anyway. Oh, I hate it when I have something that I'm just like, this is so going to help you, and I've seen it recently and I can't find it. Sorry, guys. We're going to have to do without it. But I'll try and explain it to you anyway. Basically, backwards mixing starts at the mix bus and then goes down the line of your buses in the order of drums, bass, guitars, keyboards, all other instruments, then backing vocals, and then the lead vocal bus. And that's kind of where the bulk of your mix is done, is the mix bus and those buses. And all of that I would do in mono, by the way, to help with separation by EQ. So I'm not just getting separation by boink, boink, panning things as far apart as you can, thinking that that's going to get separation, because it might not, because when you collapse that to mono, you may well find that you have frequency masking going on and phase cancellation. So you do need to do the EQ phase in mono, in my opinion. And there are people that disagree with that, but fundamentally, the reason why I do most of my mixing in mono is not because my end result is going to be mono. It isn't. Common misconception, number one misconception about mixing in mono is that we mix for mono. No, we don't. No, we don't. We mix for stereo, but we use mono as a tool to enable you to get tighter and better, a more detailed separation of the elements of your mix. So anyway, so mix buses, then individual tracks going on down, leaving the lead vocal till last, which is the point that I was coming to. Was the lead vocal is your superstar element. That's the one thing that you want to feature the most. So I leave it to last so that I can pay the most attention to it, whilst having the context of a sort of 95% complete mix. And the vocal is just basically being parachuted in on top of that effectively. So you've got this beautifully mixed backing band, and it sounds fantastic. Then mixing the vocal in the context of that fantastically sounding backing band, you're going to end up treating the vocal with a lot more love and attention than you otherwise would if you start with the vocal. Because if you're going to start with the vocal, you get the vocal sounding really, really nice on its own. Then as you work through the mix further down the line, you start thinking, oh, but now that I've done these guitars, now that I've done this keyboard, now I've done the Hammond B3, suddenly the voice sounds a little bit lost and a little bit thin. I go and adjust that. Then you work further down the line. Oh, I need to go back and adjust that vocal again. So you end up playing this little cycle thing going over and over and over and over again. And you can easily end up in trouble that way. And you can easily end up playing the ever-decreasing circles of mixing, which is it's a never-ending task. You never actually finish a project because it never sounds as good as you think it could do. You always end up chasing your tail. But if you start backwards, heading towards the lead vocal is going to shine a lot better because it's the last thing you mix, so therefore it's going to sit on top of everything else for a start, plus how you EQ it, how you compress it, how you maybe use serial compression with a couple of compressors, as well as, you know, compression on the bus as well, to make that vocal really pop through. So you can do all of that. Give that vocal lots of love and attention at the end of the day. So basically the vocal is the last thing I do. Your method may vary. You may start on a different plane. You may start with the vocal and end up with the drums, and you know, it depends upon the material that you're mixing. It depends upon what the star element is. If the star element is the drums, like for example, you're doing a play along for a drummer, you're mixing a play along for a drummer like Dave Weckl or someone like that, or Vinnie Colaiuta, then the drums are the star element of that mix. Everything else serves that sound. So the vocal is less important now, even though it's kind of singing the song. It's less important because the drums are now the feature. Okay, so I hope that's helped, and I hope that I've not over labored that point. So let's see if we've got some other questions. Because I've been yakking away. Like I like to do. Peter's talking about Isotope, and they have a channel strip called Neutron, which listens to your track and gives you a custom preset for your track. Yeah, I heard lots of good things about that in Neutron. And Isotope products in general are really, really good. They do some awesome stuff. And I believe they're also looking for some people to do some coding for them as well, from what I read just recently. I know Softtube are looking for project managers. So if you guys are in the market if you're looking for a job and you've got those skills, go contact them. Martin says, don't have it, but read a lot about it. The sync track is cool to do things like balancing kick and bass to avoid phase cancellation. Yeah. So you guys are talking about that. That's cool. Are you talking about panning the bass? Peter, Martin's saying to Peter, it's better to learn from trying things out, though. Sometimes you may not want that. I often just pan the bass a little to the right to avoid that problem. Yeah, you know what? Even if you pan something, you're not necessarily going to avoid the phase cancellation issue. In fact, you're not going to avoid the phase cancellation issue. The phase cancellation is still going to be there, especially if you hit the mono button. And at the end of the day, the other thing you have to bear in mind is that if somebody is listening to your mix, they're not necessarily going to be sitting where you're sitting, listening to the mix. They're not going to be in the sweet spot, the apex of the triangle between left and right speakers pointed at their ears at the optimum level. They're not going to be sitting there. Nobody sits there, you know? And also they're going to be in a very reflective environment because most homes are. So you're going to get, you know, you might put music on the stereo and then be in the next room, or you might be down the hallway, or you might be in the kitchen. That sound is going to come out the speakers, reflect off of any of the surfaces in the room that the speakers are in, and then reflect down the corridor or into the kitchen, reflect off the surfaces in there before it hits your ears. So by the time it gets to your ears, it's going to be in mono anyway. So if you've got phase cancellation between your kick and your bass, by the time it gets to you, to your ears in mono, you're going to lose some of that low end. So best way to do it is to try and align the phase between the kick drum and the bass. And you can use auto align to do that, for example. Auto align is a fantastic product. I don't have it because it's a little out of my price range at the moment. But yeah, something like that to align the phase between kick and bass guitar will then deal with that phase issue that you've got going on. Because as I say, by the time it hits your ears, in any of the scenarios I've just outlined, it's going to be in mono anyway. So you'd be surprised, actually. Most people listen to music in mono, even if they've got stereos. Even though we have, our world since the 1960s has been stereo, the audio world, still doesn't mean that you're not actually ultimately going to be listening to it in stereo, because you're probably not. Most people don't. They just don't realize it, which is why it's so important to do your EQ and compression in mono. That's the most compelling argument I have for that. But anyway, that's not really what the question was. Okay. Oh, chat has just skipped up massively. Rena says if it sounds good in mono, it sounds amazing in stereo. Yes. Correct. Face cancellation. Yes, my face was cancelled a while back. This is a replacement. Skip is back. He was looking for your compression chart. Yeah, I don't know what's happened to it. I actually got it off of Joe Gilder. And I don't know, maybe he has removed it. That's entirely possible. But thank you for looking for that, Skip. I appreciate it. Martin says there is a long hall between bedroom, studio, and living room. Easy trick. I walk down the hall and listen from the living room. No brainer. Yeah, that is one way to check your mix in mono. Walk down the hallway. Another really good thing that will do for you is it will check how much bass you have present in your mix. Because if your room is anything like mine, your ears might deceive you about how much bass there is in your room, even if you've got bass traps. Bass traps are not necessarily going to completely solve the bass problems in a small room because of the length of the wavelength of a low frequency sound. A low frequency sound takes longer to develop, and therefore, in most rooms this size, I mean, it's only 9 feet to the door from where I'm sitting. In fact, it may well actually be 7 or 8 feet. And most bass tones are at least 16 feet long, if not more. By the time it hits that door, it's not fully developed, and it's going to come back into the room not fully developed, with the next bass note coming in. So do you see what I mean? So a good way to check how much bass you have in your room is to walk down the hallway. And if your mix has like a ton of bass in the hallway, then you know what you need to do. You need to go and dial out some bass. Whoopi says, Martin, do you crank up the volume for this check? Well, you probably want it loud enough so that all the elements of your mix can be heard down the hallway. I can't do that here, except during the daytimes when my kids are at school. That's the only time when I can really crank up. But you know what? I prefer to mix at a low volume anyway. So that kind of, to a degree, negates the effect of how long the wavelength of a bass note needs to be in this room. Tell me about proper volume levels for mono. Well, mono or stereo, my personal preference is to mix at a volume that is kind of sufficient that I could be talking to somebody stood here Like if my wife came in whilst I was working on a mix and she would come and stand next to me, we could have a conversation and I could hear everything that she says without the music overwhelming that conversation. And then I'm mixing at the right volume, and I have my monitor station calibrated to that kind of volume level, so that I know that when it's up the middle, it's in exactly the right volume for what I call low volume mixing. It's the way to go. Mixing at a low volume is the way to go because it helps prevent ear fatigue. If you're listening to loud music all the time, your ears get tired very quickly. And when that happens, you start making bad decisions in your mix. The other thing that happens with a loud volume is the top end and the bottom end get hyped. It's natural. It's the science of it. I forget what the curve is called. Somebody in the chat will know what it's called and will be able to remind me. But ultimately, what happens is if you increase the volume coming out of your speakers, you're increasing the bass and you're increasing the treble. And then, of course, you're increasing the amount of sound that is going to be hitting your walls. And that means these guys over here, my acoustic panels, are going to have to absorb a lot more. And there is actually an absorption point that most acoustic foam panels reach before they are, once they get to that point, they are oversaturated and they stop absorbing. So, mix it at a low volume. That's what I would say. Have it just about audible enough that you can hold a conversation over the top of it. There you go. Martin says, I mix it all low volume because you have neighbors and you mix at night. Woodby then says, so what if it sounds good loud, but low volume, no good? Then you need to keep working on your mix. If the bottom of your mix falls away at low volume, which you will get to some degree because at a low volume, there is less bass energy. But if the bottom completely falls out, then you need to keep working on the low end aspect of your mix. Martin says, when I think I'm almost there, then I will treat myself to a bit of loudness and then turn back down to compare. Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. Kind of when you're at that point where you're just like, yes, this mix is so very, very nearly finished, then turn the volume up a bit. And if the highs are really, really harsh, you're not there yet. And if the bass is too much, you're still not there yet. Turn it back down, get back into mono, work on finding those EQ problem points, find where that harshness is, pull it out, check where, the low end rumble's coming from, get rid of it, and then rinse and repeat. Also, you can move to the back of your room. Moving to the back of the room is a good place where you can check how much bass you've got in your mix, because that's where it's all going to go. Even if the wavelength's not fully developed, that's where it's going to go. So that's another good thing to do. Peter says, when I critiqued a mix of his, I said something like, I hear you've rolled the low end of the vocal somewhere around 130. I checked the mix and the high pass was set at 134. Wow. Thanks for that, Peter. Really? Yeah. I've been mixing a lot of years, so I guess I can hear those kind of things fairly accurately. So, I was only 4 dB out. Sorry, not 4 dB, 4 hertz out. That's pretty good. Reference tracks help. Yes, they do. Reference tracks definitely help, but you want to make sure that you are not running them through the same processing as your mix. If you're going to reference, create a separate mix bus. Okay, create a bus to which all your buses are going to, and call that your mix bus. So then when you put your reference track in there, ensure that the only place the reference track is going to is your main output mix bus. That way, it will not be subject to any of the processing that is going on in the rest of your mix. It will be completely separate and completely clean. And then the other thing you need to do is make sure that it is level matched with your mix. Okay? Or you could get something like Mix Checker. Audified make a wonderful plugin called Mix Checker, and it emulates a whole bunch of different scenarios. So you don't have to go out to your car anymore. You don't have to put earbuds in your ears anymore. It simulates all of those. Martin says, I do that all the time. Loop the mix and walk around listening. Yeah, figure out where the problems areas are and adjust. Yep, it's a good way to do it. Raina says, I think references is a good solution. I check every mix with reference mixes. You know what? It really is very important. I still use reference tracks, and I've been doing this a lot of years. Because, you know, they're so important. Because by using a reference track that's in the same ballpark genre, similar instrumentation, you're actually borrowing someone else's ears, effectively. You're bringing somebody else's work into your song to compare and contrast, to help you stay on track. That's the reason I use a reference track. I don't use it to kind of like think, I want to get that snare drum sound in that song. Sometimes I might do that, but for the most part, I'm not doing that. I'm not thinking to myself, oh, I'd really like to try and get my snare drum to sound like that. So I'm going to kind of listen and then try and copy with EQ and compression to kind of make it sound like that snare drum. Sometimes I have done that, but for the most part, I'm not doing that. For the most part, I'm using a reference track to periodically go to make sure that I'm not drifting off out into some weird world of ear fatigue. Okay. Woodby says, JL, what's that link? What's the link to what? Can you be a little bit more specific? Martin says, regarding level balancing for reference, should I use gain leveling or volume fader? Just use the volume fader. Excuse me. Yeah, just use the volume fader. Keep it simple. All right, we've been going for an hour, just over. It is now 1:15. I will stay on for another few more minutes. We've got 10 people. Would have been nice if we could have had a few more. But yeah, I guess that's just the way it is. Oh, the Audified Mix Checker. I think you just go to audified.com. And you probably find it there. I can always do a Google search for you guys because I'm so kind. Let's go and do Audified Mix Checker. Let's go to all. And let's copy that link. Let's go back to the stream. I did advertise the broadcast. Oh, crikey. That's got too many characters in it. I can't post that. Let's delete that. Movie Kid is here, finally. I've been waiting for you, Movie Kid. Nah, not really. We're very glad you're here, though. I'm going to close that one. Let's just actually go to it. Here we go. Control copy. So glad you're streaming. Always good to tune in. Well, thank you so much for that. Appreciate it. Here we go. Here's the link to the Audified Mix Checker. Go get it. Sample Magic is another one. Yes, thank you, Raina. Good call. Woodby says he invited Dooley. Yes. He's not made it through, though, has he? Which is a bit of a shame. And Movie Kid, you've just arrived, just kind of like towards the end. I'm going to be on just for a few more minutes. So if you've got a good question, get it in here. And we can talk around that question for a few minutes. That'll be good. Anyone got any more questions? We will stay on until 1:30 a.m. British summertime. Speaking of British summertime, it is officially autumn here in the UK as of today, which means it is not going to be too far away before our clocks change by an hour. So I think it's possibly the same for you guys, that you spring forward for an hour and then you fall back for fall. I think is probably right for the United States. It's the same here. So I think pretty much we are going to be going back an hour. At some point, I need to check when that is so that I make sure all of you guys know when that is. Martin says, newsflash, all these live streams you and Jonny are doing is having an impact. Warren Hewitt just started doing a live stream from Spitfire Studios. Yeah, Warren's been talking about doing live streams for a while. I think Pete Woj in particular has been in his ear about doing it. And Joe Gilder as well. They've been in his ear suggesting that he do it. So I'm glad he's doing it because he's really good at Q&As as well. Plus he has an awesome studio. He has a way better studio than mine. He has better bandwidth than me. Maybe Kid says, really enjoying the streams, mate. Well, I appreciate that. Appreciate that very much. It would be very, very nice if more people thought just like you, and it'd be great if we could expand this live stream viewership to, I don't know, 30, 40, maybe even 50 on a stream. I've not had that yet. I've not even hit the dizzy heights of 20 yet, so that'd be nice. Peter says 29th of October in Sweden is when the clocks change. You know what? I think it might be similar here as well. Yeah, I think you and Raina might be right about that date. I will look into it and I will post up a little short video or something where I'll say, hey guys, just beware. British summertime reverts to Greenwich Mean Time at some point. Long live ABBA. You know what? I'm not a big fan of ABBA at all, but I tell you this, those guys wrote some excellent, outstanding songs. And they had a unique sound that was well, the mixes were really good. They had all sorts of top session musicians on their records, like Bernard Purdie, who's a wonderful drummer who played with Steely Dan and James Brown and Aretha Franklin, and Bernard Purdie is possibly the most recorded drummer in history, after, maybe second only to Steve Gadd. And both Bernard Purdie and Steve Gadd have appeared on ABBA records. So there you go. And Chuck Rainey, the great bass player, who has been on a lot of Steely Dan records, also appears on a couple of ABBA records as well. Toto. Yeah, I like Toto very much. Jeff Porcaro is one of my favorite drummers. And it was very, very sad when he died so young, cut down in his prime, my opinion. A wonderful, wonderful drummer with a terrific sense of feel. Appearing on a couple of Steely Dan records, and also, I think, on Donald Fagen's The Nightfly. I certainly haven't forgotten Toto. They were great. They still are. I think they had, I think until recently, they had Keith Carlock on drums for them. That's the last I remember anyway. It's cool to have some night owls here, says Movie Kid. Yes. I'm kind of used to it because the majority of my customer / client base / subscriber base are predominantly United States. But I do have some European folks as well, like Peter and Rainer, among a few others who are fellow Europeans. And I'm not going to get into Brexit and all of that because it's just too upsetting and depressing. And Peter and Rainer are talking about where in Germany. And yes, Rainer lives in Cologne, which is an incredibly beautiful city. I played the Cologne Jazz Festival many, many years ago, probably 25 years ago, maybe it would be. Maybe even longer than that. 1993, maybe. I played Cologne, and that's the last time I've been to Germany. But I say I've been to Germany, but really, I know the airport. I know the hotel where we stayed and the venue where we played in Cologne. And the play, you know, similar for Bonn and Berlin and Frankfurt. So I've not actually really been and explored Germany. I would love to though. I have friends who are in Germany. So yeah, got to be something that I do. Woodbeast says, did I get rid of the wind that I had last week? Woodbeast, are you really asking me that question? Do you really want to know the answer? The answer is we had our double glazing in the lounge replaced. That should tell you enough about how I got rid of the wind. Martin says, I always do. The like button adds the videos to your YouTube channel, which helps spread the word. Yeah, likes are really important. If you hit the like button, then lots of people get to see it. It goes up the watch, what YouTube called a watch list. So the higher up I go up the watch list, the more it appears in people's recommended views, recommended videos stream in YouTube. So yeah. So hit the like button. I've got 9 likes. Wow, I didn't even notice. 11 people watching. How's the internet research going? I'm not really sure what you're referring to, Movie Kid. Sorry. And Woodby says, clicked. I have 10. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, likes and subscriptions are really important. And you know what? It was not that long ago that I posted up a video. I think it was actually in the summertime. I posted up a video celebrating having 500 subscribers. And I was just like, yes, I've hit 500. Yes, that's awesome. You know what? As of this morning, I checked. I had 644. So pretty much in the last sort of, I don't know, 8 weeks, I've added 145 or so subscribers, which is great. So my first target, folks, is to get to 1,000 subscribers, because then that opens up a whole bunch of other features of YouTube that I currently don't have. One of which is being able to post up paid for content, videos that you can buy direct out of YouTube, and the feature that Jonny has in his live streams, which is the super chat. Peter asks, are you on Spotify? No, I am not on Spotify. For the very simple reason that they do not pay the revenues to the artists that have content up on Spotify, at least not appropriately. You know, to make a reasonable sum of money from Spotify, you have to have billions of plays. Billions. It's absurd. You know, even Madonna doesn't make very much money out of Spotify. Yeah. Martin said it. They don't pay SH. Exactly. It's like a nano penny per 100 plays. Nano penny. It's not even, it's not even a halfpenny. It's not even a quarter of a penny. It's a nano penny, a micro penny. Don't get me started on Spotify, please. Dooley Still is here. Little fanfare for him. He says, hello all. I just got in from marathon mowing. Marathon mowing. You mowed 26.2 miles of lawns? Wow, you are amazing, Dooley. And you got Wood Beast note. Excellent. 0.6 cents per play. That's 0.06 cents. 0.06. Yes. It's not even a halfpenny. It's half of a halfpenny. Yeah, don't get me started. I will tell you folks where you can find my music. You can find it at nimbitmusic.com/Jonny Lipsham. I'm going to put that up there just now. HTTP www.nimbitmusic.com/Lipsham. That's where you get my my music, my last EP, Belonging to Tomorrow, made last year, and the single I just released a couple of weeks ago, which is called what's it called? Softly Spoken. There you go, which is an instrumental piece, which some of you will have heard me talk about maybe last stream or maybe the one before. And it's a cool little instrumental, which I originally wrote for the Persona Symphonic Orchestra series that I'm doing on YouTube at the moment. And it was just meant to be just like a little brass piece, because I was just going to do the brass section of the orchestra. So I thought, hey, let's do this little intro with this little brass piece that kind of grew arms and legs. And before I knew it, I was setting my drums up in the hallway for putting brushes on, and I got my upright bass out, my electric cutaway upright bass. I got that out, and I was doing piano, and I got my Ibanez hollow body guitar out and put some guitar on there as well. Before I know it, I'd spent like the entire morning doing this thing, all for an intro to a video. Yes, Woodbeast is updating Dooley on what he's missed. Yes, I did a section on a follow-up section from the last stream where we talked about compressors and compression. So we did the basics. So basically I was talking about how you can apply compression in a really smart and artistic and creative way, and some tips on bearing in mind how much compression you're doing on a track per track basis, and how much compression you're doing on the buses and your mix bus, so that you don't end up cumulatively over compressing, because that is so easy to do. Really is. Even a really experienced mix engineer can fall foul of that, and you end up having to go back and kind of reduce everything. And Dooley says, sounds very good. We'll definitely check it out. Yep. Would appreciate that. Feel free to watch the replay, folks. If there's stuff there that we talked about that I kind of just prattled away on that you would like to go back and have another listen to, then that's cool. Also, can I make a request to the 10 of you that are here, and to anybody else that is watching this on the replay, who would like to come to my next stream? If you would like to come to my next stream, what I'd like you to do is I would like you to post comments either on this stream, not in the chat, but in the comments afterwards, suggestions for focus points for the next several streams, okay? And I will collect them all. So you can do that on the comments of this video, and you can PM me on Facebook, and you can email me at johnny@johnnylipshamstudios.co.uk. Email me there and get your suggestions over there for subsequent live stream episodes, so that we've got some focus that comes from you, what you guys want to talk about. So it's not just me going, right, we're going to talk about EQ. or we're going to talk about reverb and delays. What I want to do in these live streams is talk about the things that are most pressing for you guys, things that you want to learn more about, or things that you're struggling with, or those kind of things. So if you guys could do that, that would be really, really cool. You can also, if you wish, I think we did it last stream as well. If you wish to, you can make a donation via PayPal. If you want to do that, I can put the link up here as well. But again, that is purely a voluntary thing. I'm not asking people to donate at all. I'm not really that kind of person. I find I personally struggle with asking for donations, so I'm not going to. I'm not asking for a donation. I'm basically saying, hey, if you would like to, you can. It's the option is there for you. If that's, if you would want to support what I do here and enable me to kind of take things forward, if that's one way in which you can do that, then yeah, go ahead. Even £1 or even 50p is going to help me. But as I say, you don't have to. I'm not asking you to. It's just an option. It's just there. It's just another way in which you can reach out to me if you want to. All right. Dooley still says, Will, getting ready. I heard you talking about most recording drummers. Jim Gordon. Yes. Yep, indeed. Say no more. Yeah. Jim Gordon. Plenty to talk about him. Plenty to talk about a whole bunch of drummers, actually, that are wonderfully well recorded, who have played on thousands of records, and nobody knows really too much about them. I will mention a couple of guys, a couple of great drummers that I know. A guy called Paul Clavis. He's a London-based session drummer. He's fantastic. He's pretty well recorded as well. And again, nobody really knows who he is, but he's terrific. Who else can I think of that I could talk about? I could talk about hundreds. Whippy says Dooley still is a great drummer. Well, there you go. I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all. So that's cool. I'm a drummer as well. You may not know that. Jim Keltner. Yes, Jim Keltner is also a terrific drummer who is very, very well recorded. Jim has played on Stevie Wonder records. He's played on Steely Dan records. He's played on Doobie Brothers records. I think he's on 4 or 5 Doobie Brothers records. And a few other soul bands that I can't remember the name of at the moment, but yes. For me, Jim's best drum track is on Josie, Steely Dan's Josie from the Asia record. Because not only does he play a really, really great in the pocket drum track, there's a point in the song where everybody's playing this kind of like stripped down riff. He's playing a garbage can lid. You're kind of like going on this garbage can lid, and it just sounds epic. It sounds brilliant. What a genius little thing to just drop in for those 4 bars. But yeah, we could talk about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of drummers. Ginger Baker, Keith Moon. I'd also like to make a mention to the drummer with the Jimi Hendrix Experience. He was a terrific drummer, absolutely outstanding, because he was I forget what his name is, it'll come to me in a minute, but he was jazz trained, as was the bass player with Jimmy. They were both jazz trained musicians, but boy, could that guy play. Mitch Mitchell. Yes, that's the guy. Just as soon as Martin posted it, that was exactly, yeah, his name came back into my head. Mitch Mitchell. What a wonderful drummer. He had a terrific feel. He kind of like had elements of Elvin Jones in the way he played, as well as having a super backbeat. Loved it. Really complimented what Jimmy did in a big way. All right, we have gone over the time that I said that we'd cut off for, because it is after 1:30 in the morning, and I have to be up very early. I've got a very busy day ahead of me. So I will be signing off just now, but I would just like to say to the 10, 12, 13, 14 or so people that we've had in the room tonight, a big thank you for coming and for asking your questions and for getting me talking. I really do appreciate it, and I hope that these live streams are helpful. I would like to do live streams going down the road where we do more inside of Studio One, and I will remember to not just, I'll remember to share the screen correctly next time. And we can talk about songwriting, we can talk about arranging, we can talk about chord changes and harmony and stuff as well. I'd love to talk about all of those kind of things going down the road, and we can demonstrate some harmonic ideas as well. So there you go. I hope this has been a helpful stream for you guys. I can see that the picture quality has not been very good for the majority of the stream. It's a bit pixelated and a bit kind of it freezes quite a lot. So I'm really sorry about that. I hope that it is not off-putting, seeing the picture quality so bad. But yeah, I hope that what you're getting out of this is helpful. And hopefully we'll be doing another one next week. I'm going to keep them going weekly for now, mostly because I am just so horrendously busy with studio work and with family life as well. Having 2 kids under the age of 10, that's just what it is. Julie says, thanks, JL. You're clean out of sight, and that's a fact. Thank you. Appreciate it. Very good stream, Johnny, and thank you. Cool. Thanks, folks. I will see you around, probably on the Home Studio Trainer Support group and all the other Studio One groups. And I will probably pop up on one of Dave Vignola's streams. He's actually revising the way that he does his live streams. So we're in discussion about that at the moment. So we will see how that works out. And I'm sure I will pop up on Johnny's Songwriting Wednesdays streams as well. So until then, I will bid you all a farewell. Good night. Peter says, I'm not here for the picture quality. Thanks, Peter. Good night, folks.